As a teacher for many years, we always, by experience, learn to have everything you need together. So I put water in here. I have my light because my eyes at my age are not doing so well. And I have a pointer. So, prepared. Also, one of the hazards of a teacher is that we tend to speak a while, a long while sometimes. So I want to highlight, this is not going to be quick and short, but hopefully it'll be informative and you'll find it inspiring, especially as you keep coming back and see the icons we have. I want to thank Father Ben for asking me to do this because the parish that we have produced the icons. And what I'd like to do today is do a twofold thing. One is to explain the icons for sure, but to put them into context because, pardon me, they didn't come out of nowhere. They came out of your heart of faith. As Jesus said, from the heart of a person, you'll see what they're all about. You'll see them as good or see them as bad. And I think if we look at the icons and look at our parish life, we'll see what fruit we have. The icons were the result of 2 years of meetings here in the parish. As we were looking forward to our centennial celebration, Father Dan invited the parish to come together in many committees, in the parish council, the liturgy committee, the finance committee, and then several full parish meetings where we were all able to share our thoughts and ideas about who we are as a parish and where do we want to go and what we would like to do. That process of dialogue is what our Holy Father calls the synodal process. And although he didn't use that word, synodal, that's exactly what we were doing. And if you read the criterion this week, or have gotten it, and sometimes it comes late, you'll see an article by Archbishop Thompson about the synodal process. The Holy Father asked that the entire church, every parish, every religious institution, every educational institution, every diocese, every country all over the world enter into what he called a synodal process. And he explained, especially Archbishop Thompson explained in his article what that is. It's a process of listening to one another in respect. We don't always agree. That's okay. The Holy Spirit inspires in a multitude of ways, but we know if the Holy Spirit dwells among us, he brings us to unity. And so the Holy Father says, we need to be a church that's listening to one another at all levels and in all dimensions. And we have been doing that in this parish ever since I've been here. And I can go back almost 25 years when I was pastor here. And that process of listening brought forth a lot of things. I'd like to highlight a few. That's one of them, the icons. But if you go back further, when I came, this wooden background here was all that was there. There was no crucified Christ. It was the wooden background and the translucent light that's coming through the cross. Sort of, that was the cross. When I came in dialogue, people came up and we talked about it and we discussed it. Then we put in the frame of the cross. A little bit later, somebody came up from the parish and said, I'll donate the body, the corpus. And so the corpus was put on. Then, a little bit later, another parishioner came up and said, I'll donate the risen Christ. And then for a while, if you remember, we would switch them back and forth. In Lent, we'd have the crucified Christ, and then from Easter on, we'd have the risen Christ. But especially since we have the tabernacle, which is appropriately placed, that's hard to do. So the choice was made. We'll keep the crucified Christ here. As you come in, that's what you see. And here at the altar, we celebrate that immensity of Jesus' love, his body given for us, his blood poured out for us. That will remind us immediately what we're going to do here. And then as we leave, we'll see the risen Christ, because when we go out, It's up there, if you haven't noticed. It's over you. He looks over us all the time. When we go out, it'll be the risen Christ who reminds us who we're going to see in our daily life. We don't see the dying Christ. That's happened. Jesus died once and for all. He'll never die again. We remember that because of the power of his love and grace that comes from that. But he's risen to us, and he's always present as the risen Lord. So that's what reminds us as we go out. That was part of this dialogue. They came out of dialogue. What do we need? What do we want? Also, the renovation of the parish hall. That came out of dialogue. What do we do with the legacy of hope monies that we have? And that was chosen. That, to me, the renovation looks like something from the Hilton Hotel. It's very nice. It's the nicest one, I think, in our city. So that came out of it. If you look at, and you've noticed, you can't help it, the renovation of the parish offices, the new windows and that came out of our meetings for those 2 years. The chairs that you're sitting over in that section and the chairs you're sitting on here, they came out of that same meeting. And those chairs, like a lot of these projects, came from a donation of one person who shares our life of faith and heard that we needed something, and they came forward and gave it. So the chairs were generously paid for. All of this has been generously paid for. The statues were repainted. That happened. Everything we've done here has been out of dialogue. But what I want to say, and then of course the icons, but what I want to say, it's not the projects that are the ultimate thing. They're good. They're important. And they came out of what we call targeted donations, not out of stewardship. Stewardship is what we provide each Sunday for the operational cost of the parish. That's important. We can never forget that. But in addition to that, with the means that some people have, or a fundraising where we all contribute to it, we can do very important projects that express the heart of who we are as a people. And it's that heart that is the most important in our parish life. That's what the synodal process brings forth. Yes, the projects, but it binds us together as we dialogue and we share and we listen respectfully to each other. It binds us together as a community of faith that are interconnected, that know each other, that listen to each other, that grow together. And I like to say St. Margaret Mary has a particular character about it that I don't see as intensely in other parishes, and that is our faith is present in our welcoming of people that come in, visitors. They always comment how welcoming you are, how nice everybody is, how they greeted me, they welcomed me. A lady came in from another parish about 2 weeks ago, and I saw her in the back. I know her. And I went up and I said, "Welcome to St. Margaret Mary." And she said, "I love to come here, Father." And I said, "You do? I'm glad. Why do you like to come here?" And she said, "Because people are so friendly and they smile." A joyful heart is expressed. Our faith is expressed. That's the fruit of that dialogue, that synodal process, if you will. It began when I was here. Maybe it happened before, but I knew it from my time. It was continued through Father Rick, through Father Dan, and now we go forward with Father Ben. But it's the same process of building the community in faith and expressing that in a multitude of ways. So now I'd like to turn to this that came out of that dialogue. And that's important. The style are called icons. And what is that style? It's the style that came out of the early church community. Remember, back in the time of Jesus and then beyond, they didn't have cameras or phones where you could take pictures. None of that existed. And so portrait wasn't the thing. They couldn't do it. They couldn't retain that image. But they did retain the remembrance of the faith of these people, the apostles and the saints. And it became sort of a stylized presentation. When you look at that, you can see people, obviously, but it's not a portrait. It's a stylized. It's created out of the prayer and meditation of whoever is doing that icon, and it invites us to look at the icon and to be drawn into a deeper level of faith as we stand or sit or pray before them. Each of them are made in that way. So I'd like to just briefly say a few things about them here. If I have my... Oh, I lost it. Here it is. I have a pointer here. So somebody at last Mass asked me before Mass, why don't you name them? Why don't you put a sticker there or something to tell us who they are? They are already named. If you're close by, you'll see, here's Jesus. So you'll see on each side, here's Peter. See on each side. Here's Andrew on each side. That's their name written in English, but it's a stylized. It says Saint Peter, Saint Andrew, and this is Jesus Christos, in Greek, Jesus Christ. That's how icons are designated, what they are. And each of those icons are that way. If you're way over on that side, they look like little smudges of ink. But if you get closer, you'll see what they are. Okay, so let's look here. First of all, let's look at the icon of Christ. Another thing with Christ, you'll always see here, here, and here, it says hoon. That's Greek. The one, or the being, better said. The being. That's God's name. The one who is the one. And here you have Christ he's got the gospel open, and it says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. We pull that apart so that I am is on one side, this side, and the way, the truth, and the life is on that side, because in the gospel, Jesus said many times, I am bread of life, I am living waters, I am the vine, I am. Why is that significant? Because that's the name of God. In the Hebrew Scripture, the Old Testament, when Moses asked at the burning bush, who are you? The word comes, I am who I am. Who should I tell sent me to Egypt? The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am who I am. And so that designates Jesus is God, but we see him as man, okay? And he is the way, the truth, and the life. The other thing is, you see the hand of Jesus, he's got it like this. That sort of, if you lift your hand up, your hand almost does that automatically. But if you notice Father Dan, whenever he gave the blessing, that's what he did. If you look at the Holy Father, that's what he does. A bishop often does that. Why? Because you have two fingers up. Jesus is fully God, fully man, the two natures. You have three fingers down here, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It's a way of reminding people of that mystery of our faith. And that's what he's doing there. So, let's go up above a little bit here. We have Mary. And again, here this is in Greek, all the others. Jesus is in Greek, Mary is in Greek. Mater Theou, Mother of God. And in iconography, Mary, when she presents Jesus, never presents a baby. If you notice, that's not a baby. That's a man, a fully grown person. It's little, but he's fully grown. He looks young there, that's nice, but he's not a baby. In Western pictures of Mary, we often show a baby. Well, that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that, but in the iconography style, he's always fully a man. Why? Because he's not a baby anymore. Mary always presents him to us. Do what he tells you. Here he is, if you will. But it's always the adult Christ that we are in a relationship, not to the baby Jesus. That's good for children, but as adults, we follow the risen Lord. So that's always presented in that way. Interesting, as the icon makers were doing this, I said, we have all men. We had the apostles already down there. The evangelists were going up. I said, this is not a monastery of men. We are a parish church of men and women. So let's put some women up here. So Mary is there, woman, Mother of God, Mother of Jesus. And we put on each side of her two other women of the gospel. On this side is Veronica. Veronica was with Jesus on the way up to Calvary. She has the cloth She wiped the face of Jesus, and tradition says Jesus gave her his picture. The true picture, a true icon of his face. Do you know what Veronica means? Do you? That was a good try. I like your enthusiasm. Can I tell you what it means? Okay. Veronica, Verona icon, true icon. That's her name. Verona icon, Veronica put together. So she bears a true image of Jesus to us in his passion. On the other side, we have Mary of Magdala, right here, and her name is here, Saint Mary of Magdala. She is the first witness to the resurrection. If you remember the stories, in 50 days now, I guess, we'll celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. And she's the first one there. She meets Jesus, she's the first one to meet the risen Christ. Well, she went to the tomb with ointment to anoint him. So you have here Mary presenting Jesus, Veronica on the way to Calvary, and Mary of Magdala, the first witness to the resurrection. On each side of them, you have the evangelists. You have Mark, in his name there. You have Matthew. You have John. You have Luke, and then you have John here. Why in that order? Because Mark is the first gospel written, maybe around 65 after the death and resurrection of Jesus. And then the next one that was written was Matthew, about 15 years later, more or less. 15 years later, Luke was written for the Gentile community. Matthew was written for the Jewish community, Christian community. Luke out of Antioch North, where the Christian community began to be known as Christian and the Gentile community began to come in. He wrote for the Gentile community. And John wrote many years later, some would say 100 after the time of Jesus, some even projected more than that. And his gospel is a gospel of deep reflection. When you read the Gospel of John, you can't help but be drawn into the mystery of who Jesus is and turn that over in your heart. Two things here. Here, you see written here, that writing says, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, Son of God, as is written in the prophet Isaiah. That is the beginning of his gospel. On this side here, you have something else written. It says, and it's in that, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That's the beginning, first chapter of the Gospel of John. John here, we have John as well. John as a younger man, John as an older man. John as a younger man has the gospel open too, and that says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Our faith. Those of you who are older remember the older style of saying the Mass. There was what we called a last gospel. It really wasn't a gospel as such. That chapter is a hymn about the mystery of the Word who is with God, who becomes one of us, made flesh, and reveals the glory of the Father. We said that at the end, or it would have been nicer to sing it at the end, but anyway. So that's what you have there. So you have the Mary, the two women, and the gospel writers. Now let's go to the apostles themselves. We take the first one after Jesus, just because he's right there, is Paul here and Peter here. So let's look at Paul, and then we'll go this way, okay? Paul. He was born in Tarsus, Turkey, present-day Turkey. I was there at one point. They still designate what they said is his house. I presume it is. Tradition tells us that. That's how we know where he was buried. It's where Jesus was buried. Paul was a Pharisee. He was a strict observer of the law, the Torah. He studied in the school of Gamaliel, one of the great rabbis of the time. he persecuted the Christian community. Remember, he witnessed the martyrdom of Stephen, or Stephen was at the other mass. Stephen, the first martyr. And then on the road to Damascus, to round up the Christian Jewish community there, take him back to incarcerate them, he met Jesus, and his life was turned around. Saul becomes Paul. Paul, the great apostle to the Gentiles. Paul wrote 25% of the New Testament. And if you take the Gospels out of that 25%, it's even higher. So he has a great influence on the Christian community. He builds the community in Turkey and in Greece, and he goes to Rome and dies there. He's buried in I say he's buried in a church. No, his tomb is there and the church was built above it. St. Paul outside of the walls of Rome. That's Paul. The other one is Peter on the other side, and that they're put together. Peter and Paul, the two great men of the early community that we know very well. Peter is very important because his name was Shimon Bar Jonah. Simon Bar Jonah. Simon, son of Jonah. Simon Bar Jonah in Hebrew. That was his original name. His name was changed because Jesus, as Peter begins to follow him, he says to all the disciples, "Who do you say I am?" And they say, one of the prophets, etc. He says, "You are the Christ." And Jesus says, "It wasn't flesh and blood that revealed that to you, as my Father in heaven. You are Peter, Petros, the rock, and I will build my church upon you." And so we've always seen Peter as prominent. I mean, if you read the gospel, he's prominent in the gospels, he's prominent in the Acts of the Apostles, and he is, of course, the Bishop of Rome, and all of our bishops of Rome, the popes, are his successors. Pope Francis is a successor of Peter. The next one over here is Andrew. Andrew is the brother of Peter. They're brothers. Actually, there are three brother pairs, and I'll point those out in a little bit. So Andrew is also son of Jonah, same father, so we know they're brothers. His name is Greek, Andrew, and that's a curious thing because all of the other apostles have Hebrew or Aramaic names that we put into English, but Andrew is a Greek name. There's another Greek apostle down here, way over on the right side if you're looking at Philip. Why Greek names? Well, we can surmise, we don't know exactly, but it surely means that they were open. They were from the Galilee. If you were in Jerusalem, everything was strictly Jewish. If you were out on the outskirts or even got over to Alexandria, things became more interactive with the culture of the area. Galilee had 10 cities that were Greek cities, Roman cities. So we know by his name that the family of Peter was open, at least culturally, to the Greek people there. Very interesting. Openness that maybe we wouldn't have recognized. Andrew is the first called. Jesus calls him first. He and Philip we don't know, it's not said exactly that's Philip, but he and another man have listened to John the Baptist. They realize that John has pointed Jesus out as the Messiah. They go and they want to see Jesus. He says, "Come and spend the day with me." They do. He becomes the first follower of Jesus. Andrew, is the man who, up here, if you look at this, that's the multiplication of loaves. This little boy, Peter, is the one who points him out. We have a boy here who has some fish and bread to Jesus, okay? We know what happens there. Andrew dies in Greece. And what's interesting is Andrew is the prominent bishop, and he is the foundational bishop of the See of Constantinople. Constantinople in those days was in Greece, okay? It's Istanbul today, but Constantinople then. The patriarch, the Orthodox patriarch of Constantinople, Bartholomew, is a successor of Andrew. Who is a successor of Peter, his brother? The Pope of Rome. On the feast of Peter and Paul, the patriarch of Antioch, of Constantinople always sends a delegate, or he comes himself, to attend the Mass of the Pope in Rome. And on the Feast of St. Andrew, which is at the end of November, the Pope sends a representative, or he has gone to Istanbul to attend the Mass of the Patriarch there. That relationship is important for us because it leads to a desire for unity again in the church. So that's Andrew. I'll say it at the end, but let's go way down here on this side. This is Bartholomew, way over on this end. Bartholomew is also known as Nathaniel in the gospel. Bartholomew is his name. Bar means son, so son of, Ptolemy means farmer, son of the farmer. So his father was known as the farmer. Maybe he was a farmer too, we don't know. But we know his father was. He introduces Philip to Jesus, and when, after the resurrection, he goes into probably northern India, into Syria, and up into Armenia. Old Armenia is also part of eastern Turkey now, so we call it Armenia, but southeastern Turkey. His death was sort of gruesome. He was in Turkey, old Armenia. He was skinned alive, flayed, and then he was stuck with a knife. He is the patron, this is sort of dark humor, he's the patron of butchers, of leather workers, and dermatologists, if we have any. Interesting. We have a humor in our faith as well. So that the next one is Matthew right here, the gospel writer that we talked about up there. Matthew was born in the Galilee, as most of these were. What's interesting about Matthew, apart from the fact that he was the gospel writer, he probably went down into India and then up into Syria and maybe into old Armenia. He was, his presentation of Jesus was used by Thomas, the next one over, when Thomas went down to India. And Matthew himself was executed probably in Syria or northern Israel, what we call Israel today. He is the patron of tax collectors. He was a tax collector, civil servants, and bankers. Thomas, the next one over. Thomas, his name means the twin. To'om in Hebrew. Thomas, To'om, and it means the twin. We translate it in the gospel, Didymus, or the twin. We don't know. Was he, was he the twin of another brother? Did he look like someone else? They called him a twin. We don't know. But it is designated that way in the gospel, which allows us to reflect twin to us, his faith. Okay. He went into India, and he established the Christian community in India. And that's very interesting because when we were not even aware of India, let's say Middle Ages and all that, very much aware anyway, the Christian community was there in nascent form, small groups that maintained, without the structure of the church, adherence to Jesus. And he was there 20 years, so he was there a long time to establish that. And in India, there are several communities, very ancient communities, that trace their origin back to him. You know Father Savio from St. Joseph, he's from one of those communities. He's from the Malankar community. His rite of celebrating the Mass when he's not celebrating for us is in the Malankar rite. So Thomas, we have an influence of Thomas here in Terre Haute. The next one over here is James. James is son of Alphaeus. Matthew is son of Alphaeus. Down here, look way over the end, that is Simon. Simon is son of Alphaeus. And Jude is the son of Alphaeus too. Therefore, brother, 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 brother. 4 brothers. We have another brother pair on this side, James the elder and John. They were brothers to each other, not to the others, but they were brothers. Peter and Andrew were brothers. Anyway, it's interesting because one of the things that I discovered as I was doing this, I am sure I had thought of it, but not really sunk in. There are many brother relationships. The mother of Jude and Simon and James the Lesser and Matthew was Mary of Cleopas. There are 3 names that are the same person. Alphaeus is her husband. The mother is called wife of Alphaeus. Sometimes she's called the wife of Cleopas. Sometimes she's called the wife of Clopas. That's the same person. Those 3 names are the same person. The wife, Mary of Clopas, Mary of Cleopas, is the sister of a very prominent person, Mary, mother of Jesus. And if you think of the death, who's around the base of the cross? Mary, mother of Jesus, Mary of Clopas, her sister, Mary of Magdala, this lady here, who became very close, like family to the family of Jesus, and then other people. But those 3 women were right there at the foot. Why were they at the foot and the others were not so close? Because they were family. The Roman soldiers allowed them to come up to the foot to mourn the death of Jesus. Very interesting. To me, anyway, very interesting. James, there's 2 James. James the Lesser, James the larger or elder. Why is that? We translate lesser. It's James who probably is the smaller or the younger, James who is the older. That's how they designated each other in the gospel. Those 2 had the same name, so they had to pull them apart. Another quick thing here, over here. This is, if you look on that, it says Judas. And last night, before Mass began, someone said, Judas? Didn't he betray Jesus? I said, yeah, but that is not Judas Iscariot. Judas translate as Jude. And to sort of keep it straight in our mind, although this says Judas here, it's Jude. It's not Judas Iscariot. It is the Apostle Jude here. And Jude and Simon together went into Syria and then into old Armenia. And probably coming back down, they were in Beirut, and that's where they were martyred. Simon was sawed in half, his martyrdom. And Jude was beaten to death with an axe and finally killed with the axe. If you remember, Jude in our Catholic tradition is often the saint of the impossible. Why? Because the Christian community saw his courage. His last name is Jude Thaddeus. Thaddeus, if we translate that from the Aramaic, it is heart of courage. So he already had the name heart of courage. When the Christian community saw that he was martyred by the axe, they kept chopping at him until he died. They said, this is a man of courage. We can bring our hopelessness, our destitution, our despair, our fears to him. And that built, so now we have Jude, the saint of the impossible, if you will. He's also shown with the, not in this icon, but often with the flame up here, the Pentecost flame. He was there. And he's shown with an image of Jesus here, and that comes from a legend of someone asking him to take this little image to Jesus and ask if he could draw his face or give his face by touching it. And he said, the legend says, yes, Jesus allowed for that, and so he's shown with that little thing. Okay, sons of Zebedee. Let's hit them real quick. These 2. This is James the elder or older, and John, the gospel writer. They were brothers, sons of Zebedee. James the elder, he did most of his work in Armenia. If you look at the map, sort of Armenia, Syria, and that area. What's interesting, Jesus had a name for them, Boranges, translated sons of thunder. They had hot tempers. So all of you have hot tempers. You've got patrons here. So anyway, the hot-tempered ones, sons of Boranges. They were fishermen. Fishermen, Peter and Andrew. They all fished together. They knew each other. So what do we have? I'm going to sort of pull this together a little bit here. What do we have when we look at the apostles? Something that I knew but really hadn't sunk into my heart. And this is what happens when you meditate. Things become clearer. We go deeper in our faith. Almost all of them are family, or close relatives, or close friends in work. And that group, who knew each other well, were the closest to Jesus, who went out to the world and seeded the gospel in a multitude of places, even here in the extension of sharing the faith. And what we say is our faith comes to us from the apostles. The first Eucharistic prayer says that, if you listen to it when we do it, comes to us from the apostles. So that gives you at least sort of a share in an understanding of them. Several things. One is we have talked about making a booklet with each of the apostles from the icons there, with a bit of the apostle, what I just said and more. Maybe even have individual icons made for people that would like one icon or the other. And hopefully we can do that. Dr. Andres said he loves to work with Apple Magazine, or whatever you call it, and he'd be glad to help us out with that. Anyway, that's something we can do. Two final things. Here's an icon and here's an icon. If you look at that, this is the multiplication of the loaves. Or Jesus, who is the bread of life, feeding people bread for their life. And that little boy is the one Andrew presents to him. There they are, being fed. Why that icon? Jesus, the bread of life, giving bread for life. This is what we do at the altar in an even deeper way. Jesus offers us, Jesus, who is the bread of life, offers us himself, the bread of life. It's an icon that helps us connect with what we do every Sunday. The other one is the end of the journey to Emmaus. Jesus at the table, remember, they get there, Jesus and them have talked, they don't know Jesus yet, or they don't recognize him, gets to the table, they ask him to stay. He begins the breaking of the bread, common for Jewish, and as he breaks the bread, they recognize him. He's Jesus, the risen Lord. That's what we do here. It is an icon that propels us to this table, where we're going to soon celebrate the breaking of the bread of Jesus. So, that's sort of what I'd like to say. I have one final thought. I was going to do it at the end, but I'll do it now. Andrew. I'll leave you with this. Andrew is the patron of Ukraine. Andrew is the patron of Russia. Andrew, in a particular way, is the patron of the naval force of Russia. So I would like to invite you to pray to Andrew, to intercede, to bring peace between brothers who at this time are fighting. Ask Andrew to send Michael the archangel to defend in battle. Thank you.